Morning, colleagues. Welcome to this meeting of the Midlothian Safer Communities Board. Have we any apologies?
None intimated, Chair.
In the order of business?
As published.
Okay, I think we've got a few new faces in the room today. So maybe just if we could do a quick round the room so everyone knows who's who. I'm Councillor Owen Thompson, Chair of the Safer Communities Board.
Peter de Wenk, Ward 5 of Midlothian, Independent.
Ian Baxter, Councillor for Bonnyrigg and Green Party.
Councillor Joe Wallace, Scottish National Party.
Paul Kingham, Garrison Staff Officer for the Ministry of Defence.
Rosie Kendall, Community Safety Manager.
Kevin Anderson, Head of Customer and Housing Services, Midlothian Council.
Evelyn McHugh, Director of Health and Social Care.
Okay, thank you. That takes us then to declarations of interest. Have we any at this stage? If any come up through the meeting, please do let us know. Peter?
I have to declare that I was guilty of an unwanted fire alarm. It will be discussed later. It went from 87 to 100, and one of them is mine, and I felt bad about it, but it was a technical fault, but I want to declare it.
Not a problem. I'm sure we can address that when we come to the statistics. That takes us to item 4, the minutes of the meeting from Tuesday 2nd December. Rose, I think it was 1 or 2 wee points you wanted to pick up, or Kevin?
Chair, yes, just in terms of item 2 of the minute and C, this was in respect of officers looking to support the work of +1 and a discounted rate for the use of our facilities for the mentors and mentees. We have agreement in principle with our colleagues in relation to those services. We still need to work out the practicalities of that, but there is agreement to that suggestion.
Yeah, just a couple of errors on section 4. There's a bit where it says Chief Inspector Wilson, that should be Chief Inspector Simpson, and Chief Superintendent Ritchie should be Imrie. And it was just to note that we had a discussion under section 5, the seriously injured definition, that did get circulated.
Sorry, may I just ask a question? I keep looking at Chief Superintendent Imrie, and I'm worried how cold it is here. Can we put the heating up a little?
I think that the answer is we could turn the heating on, but it may be 3 o'clock before it made a difference. I think with that, can we accept the minutes from December? Thank you. That takes us to item 5, the local policing plan. Kenny.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a brief overview of the police activity between October and December, which obviously covered the periods, the Halloween bonfire and our busy festive period where we run our festive initiative, Operation Clean Slate. Probably the most important point within my report revolves around about the operational policing model, which for those that were in attendance at the workshop on the 2nd of February, certainly got a good insight into it as we move towards a new policing model come the 4th of March for Midlothian. The biggest significant change for us is this greater emphasis on community policing, which certainly a number of board members and certainly our community have looked for us to do. We're moving towards a 5 community policing team model, which will see the increase from 17% of our resources which were dedicated to community-based issues previously. That will rise to 54%, which was quite a significant rise, a real emphasis from us in Midlothian to actually be seen, be visible, and actually to deliver community policing throughout Midlothian. As I say, that was based on, we had a different model that started in March in 2014. We did internal reviews, we've done external reviews of it, And we firmly believe that going forward, that the model that's going to start next month is a model that will be fit for purpose, will deliver what communities expect from us, and make us far more visible within there. I'm sure the Chief Super will agree that we've put in a 6-month review period for that. So as scrutiny boards move forward, we'll certainly be keen for your feedback in terms of, have you seen a difference? Has there been feedback from your constituents and from our partners as well? Because we're keen that we get this feedback through the 6 months and that we properly engage with our communities during that period. But as I say, we're certainly we're confident that the model that we're moving towards is the right one, and that, alongside a new shift pattern, will hopefully allow us to deliver a more efficient and effective policing service for Midlothian. And just finally, just moving forward in terms of forthcoming initiatives, I think it's, whilst we speak a lot about our performance, which is very often reactive based, you'll see within the initiatives that we plan there, we're actually trying to still keep that focus on prevention, touch upon different areas. I highlighted the last time in terms of the high level of pedal cycle thefts that we have in Midlothian and break-ins to sheds. That continues for every individual that we detect or we lock up. There seems to be a new team come through, so we need to keep emphasising the need for people to help them, but also help us in terms of security. And we will be attending the bike jumble, which has been badged as Scotland's biggest bike jumble in Newton Grange, and that comes on the back of a very successful day we held in Pennycook during December as well. And thereafter, looking at the rural crime aspect of it, we're doing a lot of work at the moment with our farming community, with the NFU. We're developing a sort of youth diversionary project, which will hopefully come up and on stream in April time. And likewise, we're keen to highlight crime prevention and security advice to our farmers, and we've got a provisional date booked Thursday the 23rd of April, where we will be inviting local farmers and estate owners to come along, where we will be issuing crime prevention advice and bring along a CCTV expert as well in terms of what can be done to try and prevent rural crime. And lastly, you'll see in there our support for local education around about LGBT's anti-bullying campaign on Purple Friday on the 27th of February, where we will have officers assisting our colleagues in education and also people deployed in campuses just to reinforce that message and show our full support for that. I will leave the performance to the next item on the agenda, and happy to take any questions that you see fit.
Thanks very much. I think certainly looking at the new policing model, to me this shows one of the big advantages we have of the arrangement of actually scrutinising and discussing police matters locally, is that when a new system was brought into place and the issues were highlighted to elected members and board members about the feel of the removal or a reduction in community policing, clearly action's now being taken. It's addressing these issues, and it's through the discussions I would suggest that we've had here on a number of occasions. We've flagged up the concerns about a reduction in community policing, so I'm delighted to see the new model. I know we have an item at the end of the agenda about the workshop day that we had earlier in the year, where we talked about that in more detail, but to see it coming through with a much greater focus on community policing, I think certainly something that I know that the elected board members will be very welcoming of, because and also community councils, because it was clearly a big issue to them that they'd been raising with a number of us.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too welcome the new model, and I think that the emphasis on community policing is a good move. I get quite a number of people in the community coming to me, and they often express a concern. I think it's usually misplaced in most cases, but it's where they call the police on 101. It's been low priority, essentially. It's been, I don't know, vandals or whatever. And they've said it's taken a long time for the police to come to them. And obviously, if we're concentrating more on the community policing, then the downside presumably must be the reactive side, reacting to incidents. How would it affect the low priority incidents like that?
Thanks. Well, the model, the intention certainly is with this increased emphasis on local community policing teams that will have more officers based locally and in proximity to the lower level. So actually the intention is to assist that very situation where the lower grade calls, which are not urgent but are still affecting the quality of people's lives in a particular area, will be attended by officers who are based locally and actually working locally. That will form part of the review that Kenny mentioned there, that we're certainly keen to see that intention becomes a reality, but having the relationship with our colleagues in the area control room when they're dispatching resources, the more urgent grade calls will go to those, just for shorthand in cars as response in that way that people have become accustomed to, and actually everything else, there would be that effort to identify the most sensible and closest resource, which should be actually a member of the local policing team. And hopefully with that exposure to all the experience that people are having in a particular area, then officers locally are better placed to understand the problem that's given rise to those symptoms and actually address the problem, which might sound to some members like Back to the Future, because that's something that we spoke about a lot in Legacy, Lothian and Borders, but that is certainly the intention behind this model, is that we get people who understand what actually is driving this issue that manifests in low-level nuisance calls, for example, and can we actually get underneath it and sort it in the longer term. Thank you. From a health and social care perspective, I welcome the changes that are being put forward today. Health and social care integration is happening within the next calendar year, and a big focus of health and social care integration is about how we become more responsive to local communities as well. And we know from the statistics we've got in relation to public protection, the activity in community safety, that the police are dealing with a lot of issues that are to do with vulnerability and mental health in particular. And certainly I look forward to us strengthening those links at a community level and responding to those issues at a much earlier stage and in a way that's much more supportive of each other, community by community.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as you're aware, we do have, and we've retained our community inspectors, and we're going to have dedicated community sergeants as well, who I think will play an active role in that earlier aspect, as opposed to taking it into that next tier with the public protection. It is actually working jointly and smarter together to actually deal with issues far earlier within the community based.
Okay, with that, are we happy to note the content of the report? Yeah. Thank you. Which takes us to item 6, which is the Midlothian Community Policing Team report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As members will have seen the report, and I don't intend to go through the stats element of it, but suffice to say that it's been another busy 3-month period for our MCAT teams, who continue to deliver a fantastic job within Midlothian communities. I just want to highlight one or two key parts from it within the additional information and incidents of notes. Primarily, roundabout, you'll see there's been a fair bit of activity with them in addressing that issue that I raised earlier on, roundabout break-ins to sheds and the theft of high-value bikes. There's been a number of successes during that 3-month period, a particularly successful one where they recovered 11 stolen bikes out of one individual's address. Which again just shows that we are acting on community intelligence, because that is where we're getting our information. It's being fed to us through the community, and these officers are actively pursuing and acting upon that. And the second part I'd like to highlight is the amount of work that they're doing around about addressing drugs within Midlothian, and for a number of very, very successful turns. And again, I re-emphasise the point, this is purely based on community intelligence. Acting on that, getting in, working with their communities and actively targeting those who continue in this vein. And lastly, a bit round about, we talk about the low level issues. I think that Councillor Baxter raised there. We had a particular issue with vandalisms and buses in particular being targeted in a couple of our communities within Midlothian, and working and doing a really, really good bit of proactive work, I would say, with the bus companies and involving a tactic and things, the decoy buses. I'm pleased to say that they nipped that in the bud very early, as well as actually doing a lot of education with a lot of the youngsters within that area in terms of the damage and what they were doing within the community. And I'm pleased to say that's been really successful and a potential model should that ever arise again in the future. But I commend the report to you. The officers continue to deliver, continue to work hard, and I think they're a valuable addition to the community within Midlothian.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the bus incidents, I was very pleased to see that they'd subsided. I did read, though, that you visited the parents of the children concerned. Just wondering what the general reaction was to that. Were they surprised that the children were involved in such behaviour, or were they not interested?
I think it's fair to say, by and large, the vast majority were very, very supportive of us, hence the reason why you've not seen that continuing pattern of offending. I think they have taken their responsibilities seriously, and hopefully the message and the preventative messages that we've been getting across have been reinforced within the homes, because ultimately they have the vast majority in terms of social responsibility lies with them, and I have to say the vast majority has been very, very positive that we have received.
Sorry, thanks. That's reassuring. A couple of questions on the report. One on page 19 in the agenda. The weapons searches, I noticed 1 positive, 63 negative, which it was the one statistic that jumped out at me, and I'm just wondering why that is. That you'd think that weapons searches, you'd have a reasonable reason to suggest that weapons were being carried. That was my first question. The second one is a local matter to me, is Lastwade Centre parking. I was up there last night, and the disabled spaces, there were 9 cars parked there and not a single one had a blue badge, despite the publicity which was in the advertiser last week or the week before, and it was you'd think the message would have got across. This sounds like you could be raking in money on fines. Because that was just me going up there on a spot check, and I've heard a lot of people saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah, just firstly, in terms of the stop and search, I know that the Chief Super is going to speak in wider terms in relation to stop and search later on, so we'll cover the whole bit round about stop and search then. In relation to your bit about the parking issue at Lastwade, it's really disappointing to hear you saying that. As you say, we were very proactive in that front. We had done a lot of education. We'd worked very, very closely with colleagues in the Lastwade Centre and tried to get an educational message across to individuals. Unfortunately, you still had a cohort who chose to flout that. We did issue tickets, and we thought the right thing to do was actually working with Midlothian Council and, yes, certainly the Midlothian Advertiser to try and get that message out to that wider community. And it's disappointing that it continues, but I think we were pretty clear in our message within the Advertiser was that people who choose to continue in that vein can expect to get a ticket from us. It's certainly not a money-making venture for us. The purpose of us issuing tickets is to ensure that those individuals who have the blue badge and want to use the facilities are actually getting the primary spaces that have been dedicated for them. And those who are ignorant enough to flout that, then they will pay the consequences.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at the moment on the report? Happy to note the report. Thank you. Which then takes us to item 7, reduction in funding. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This report advises of changes to the funding arrangements for the community policing teams from April 2016, I would emphasise, rather than the coming financial year. The background is in relation to the Council's requirement to make significant savings over the coming years and the financial strategy of 15-16 through to 17-18, which was reported to Midlothian Council's meeting of the 16th of December. That financial strategy and the papers provided the detail of the actions required for the Council to ensure its financial stability, with a potential shortfall in the region of £17 million by March 2018. Consequently, as is detailed in Section 3 of the service design, with the background of these restricted resources and the continuing trends of reduced crime and antisocial behaviour in Midlothian, as part of that financial strategy, funding that is provided for the community policing teams will be reduced in the region of £125,000 per annum from 2016-17 through to 18. This consequently equates to around half of one of the community policing teams. Currently, a core group is considering the service redesign of alternative models in continuing to safeguard communities in Midlothian, which has been effectively delivered by the range of partners contributing to the Community Safety Partnership. Those changes in terms of the redesign will be reported in due course back to this board. In the meantime, the partnership will continue to closely monitor crime and antisocial behaviour through the arrangements we have in the weekly tactical and assessment and coordinating groups, the Community Safety Delivery Group, in order that we can ensure that we work in partnership to monitor the impact on vulnerable groups and victims of crime, as well as the fear of crime or antisocial behaviour. The service redesign process will ensure there is meaningful consultation and engagement in any new structure for the funded community policing teams. And in terms of the recommendations, the board is asked to note at this stage the future changes to the community police team funding. Thank you.
Clearly the funding is an issue, and it's a difficult position the Council's in. However, I think the opportunity to look at the model around the community policing teams is a particularly useful one. Simply because a model has been in place for a period of time doesn't mean it's necessarily the correct model that we need to see going forward. We've already seen in an earlier report that the policing structures are looking to change, so we can actually take this opportunity to make sure that the community policing teams are delivering the best possible outcomes for the money that's going in to support them. We are in a different environment to where the teams were put in place in the first place, and I think we see the continuing reduction in crime over a fairly lengthy period now. So I'm very positive about the opportunities that this service redesign presents to generate a better outcome for the communities in Midlothian. Any other questions, comments? I'm happy to note the report.
Before we move on, can we advise people that are new to this place that there is a hot drinks machine through the members' lounge, just in case they are feeling a wee bit chilly in this chamber?
Noted.
And if anybody wants to go and get one, we should take 5 minutes for them to go and get a hot drink.
We're okay just now? It takes us then to item 8, the Police Scotland Midlothian Police Performance Report.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'll just highlight a couple of national issues, and then Kenny will take us through the actual detail of the numbers of the local performance. One of the things, I was just looking at things really that have changed since we last met. So I think that was just a number of days before the new drink drive limit was introduced on the 5th of December last year. So clearly that has happened and was accompanied by a huge amount of publicity, and it does appear that that has had the desired effect, in as much as we have seen a decline in our incidents of drink driving right across the division actually. So it does appear that that message has been getting through to drivers. The second issue that I think I might have mentioned last time, and certainly continued to get headlines, is about child sexual exploitation, which is an issue that has certainly been discussed at the chief officer group in public protection terms, and just to advise members that Police Scotland now has a national child abuse investigation unit that started on the 5th of January this year and is actually located in Livingston, so it is actually within this division, albeit it's a national resource. The third issue I wanted to mention nationally or internationally actually is in terms of the security situation and counter-terrorism, and people will obviously have seen the headlines from January about events in Paris and then shortly followed by other activity in Belgium and indeed throughout the world. So just to reassure members that the local police are very much in touch with what the situation is as it evolves internationally and nationally, and there is very much an awareness of the threat level, which is severe in the sense of an attack being judged to be highly likely. So the most recent manifestation of the terrorism issue is in relation to young people, as you see in the headlines, 2 15-year-old, 16-year-old going out of the UK. So obviously just highlighting here that that's an issue that colleagues in education and ourselves are very alive to. And there's nothing specifically relating to this area, but we have got heightened patrols round about areas that we consider to be at increased risk. Okay, and then the issue of stop and search. I'll come back to the local issue that Councillor Baxter mentioned in relation to the activity report of the community officers. But certainly you couldn't fail to notice headlines in relation to Police Scotland and stop and search, and in particular about the what has very much been presented as consensual searches of under 12s. So along with other divisions, we've looked at the extent to which that affects our area. For Midlothian, there was one child under 12 who was subject to a search, an 11-year-old, and it was in relation to possession of a firework, and that is a statutory, there is legislation for that, so none relating to that in inverted commas voluntary search category. Stop and search generally in this area, you'll see when we come on to talk about the actual figures, there are less stop and search going on for, well, right across the board, but for drugs and offensive weapons, but the positive rate is more. So hopefully you'd agree that's a good news story, in as much as activity is being targeted in the right places and at the right times. The percentage for offensive weapons in particular is quite low. You'll see in the main report that it's only 5.5% that's positive, which isn't 100 miles away from the return rate when you see that only one positive out of 63, I think. And part of the reason for that is the tactic being used in that preventative fashion. So in this area, I don't think you would be surprised if I said we'd invested quite a lot of resource into Woodburn in Midlothian and done a lot of preventative stopping and checking of people in order to try and minimise and prevent any escalation of violence or any incidents of violence at all. And those searches might not result in a positive in the sense of actually finding a knife or any other weapon on someone's person, but I would suggest they absolutely do contribute to a safer environment for everyone to go about their business, including those that might be inclined to be offenders. You know, it's that whole bit of trying to get the community a safer place to live and just go about their daily business. I think really that's all. That I'm happy to take any questions about any of those issues and about stop and search in particular, because I do appreciate it has been very much in the headlines of late.
Yeah, I'm totally in favour of these stop and searches, and I think the vast majority of people in Scotland will be as well. It has stopped a lot of knife carrying. This was rife in Scotland at one point, especially in the west of Scotland, where knife crime was horrific. Most of the deaths in Scotland, I think, were caused by knives. Am I correct in saying that? And if that stops one death, then I'm all for continued stop and searching. And I believe too that like drug carriers would be quite happy to stick drugs on a child if they thought we stopped searching these. So I will these continue to go to stop the crime rates in Scotland.
Thank you, Chair. Just something occurred to me a couple of weeks ago. I was actually carrying a knife, but I was coming back from John Lewis's with the kitchen knives, and I thought, well, you know, how else was I going to get them home? And they were wrapped up. I made sure they were not loose. I'm just wondering if that's a technicality that, you know, how do you handle that? If you find somebody who looks like they could be ready to use it, and they say, oh, I'm actually on my way back from John Lewis's with this, and it's all packaged up, but they can quite easily unpackage it when they want to.
I mean, you're right, there's always going to be that element of discretion and that element of judgment on the part of every individual officer to assess a situation as it presents to them. There is actually a specified exemption in the law, certainly for tradesmen, for example, carrying particular tools, but clearly, well, the onus is on the individual to be able to demonstrate, you know, if you had your receipt from John Lewis and your packaging, you wouldn't have a plastic bag unless you paid 5p for it. But, you know, there will be hopefully sufficient circumstances that an officer could make a sensible decision that you weren't intending to cause anyone harm, and therefore you wouldn't find yourself on the wrong side of the law in those circumstances.
Thanks. Yeah, I made sure I had my receipt with me, just in case I look suspicious. I'd like to go back to the stop and search because, from what I understand from the media, it was consensual stop and search seemed to be the issue. I had a constituent approach me, and it was a friend of theirs. It was difficult to get the full story because they didn't want to be publicised, the parents in question, but apparently their child had been searched by consent at high school in Midlothian. And it turns out, I think it was about a year or so ago, so it wasn't recent. So I said, unless you can give me specifics, I can't actually find out what the situation is. Can you explain to me what would happen if, for instance, the school contacted the police and said they had reason to suspect or whatever, and how you would approach that in a minor who I understand should have, that they can't give consent themselves? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to get consent from a parent or guardian. Is that not correct?
No, well, the particular issue that has certainly attracted the most attention recently relates to under 12s, and the element of consent as to whether a 12-year-old should or could be asked to volunteer to be searched. And there was the whole point was there was an undertaking given last June by Police Scotland chief officers that practice would stop. And in the interim, there has been evidence that in some parts of Scotland, some of those searches, a small number, have continued to occur. So that's what the nub of this most recent controversy has been. I mean, I can certainly envisage situations where it would be legitimate to seek to search a child. That we're not talking about consensual between 12 and 18 years or 12 and 16 years, that remains in place. If a school were to contact us with suspicion of something, then that would say to me that there would be a statutory power. If they suspected that the child had a knife in their possession, for example, then there is legislation that would give a power of search that doesn't require consent. And likewise, under misuse of drugs legislation, if a teacher or a school had formed some kind of suspicion that a child was maybe behaving in a particular way or, you know, exhibiting behaviour that led them to suspect that child might be under the influence of something and might be in possession of something, that we would have a statutory power to search that child. I don't know if you want to mention anything about the high school.
Yeah, just the one thing, just for all members, information is that there is a strict drug incidence in schools policy that operates within Midlothian. So the Education Department work very, very closely with us, and there's processes and policies in place for incidents just as you describe, so that everything is completely above board. We're following the guidelines, the agreed policies and procedures, and parents will be advised during that period. But as the Chief Super says, if there is reasonable grounds, then we will have statutory grounds to search. But we're doing everything in conjunction, one by the policy and in conjunction with education.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, probably no surprise that members are asking questions about stop and search. I think it's encouraging to hear that it's not a random process that's been applied in Midlothian. From what you're saying, it's very much intelligence-led, it's targeted and it's focused. It's not just who's coming down the street at any given time. And I think certainly my reading of a lot of the stories around this, particularly the youth searches, was the concern where it was that random nature. So it's good to have that assurance that that's not the case in Midlothian. Certainly the issues at the high schools are one that I had already been asking some questions about. And it's again encouraging that there's a very robust procedure around it. But could you maybe just talk a bit more about the difference between the statutory nature of the searches and the voluntary?
Absolutely, and I think one of the aspects that has also been highlighted in most of the media reporting is the gap that there exists in relation to searches for alcohol. And a lot of the issues that we've talked about at this group before, and a lot of the issues that I'm sure elected members, constituents are concerned about, is about the relationship between young people and alcohol, and some of the behaviours that accompany that, some of the vulnerabilities that come with that for the young people themselves, becoming the health implications, obviously, first and foremost, but also some of the behaviour, not least that sometimes violent behaviour to one another, and indeed some of the sexual crime that we see is between juveniles who are under the influence of alcohol. And that's not to mention the kind of wider, maybe antisocial behaviour or general nuisance that's caused to others. So police officers have a power to confiscate alcohol. They don't have a technical power to search for alcohol, so you can envisage the scenario where officers go to a particular place and see a group of young people who appear to be staggering about and smell of alcohol, and don't actually have a bottle or a can in their hand, but they have a rucksack or they have something in their pockets. And I guess it's that part of where does engagement with a group of young people, where officers ask them where they've been, what they're doing, and then ask them to turn their pockets out. And if they, or open their bag and let them look in their bag, that would be a consensual search if they agree to that. And then officers would confiscate any alcohol found, and ideally would return these young people to their parents and have that conversation, a nearly Freudian slip, I nearly said confrontation, with parents about their level of knowledge or support for what their young people might be doing. But as Kenny said earlier, the vast majority of parents are very concerned if they're confronted with something that their son or daughter's been engaged with, and obviously grateful for the chance to intervene and hopefully prevent anything escalating out of hand. So the vast majority would fall into that category where it's consensual for young people because it's to do with alcohol. But for any age, there would be that aspect of patrols being directed by some of the hotspots of inactivity that we've seen, whether it be violence or whether it be drug dealing, and asking people in that particular area if they would mind submitting to a search. And the vast majority of people are happy to do that, and if they live in a particular area, they quite often are have a shared interest to make sure that area is safe, so they don't have an objection to being searched by the police in that context when it's explained properly, and some of this is down to that communication of why it is that police are asking people if they would mind emptying their pockets.
Thanks very much for that reassurance. I think I was a bit struck by the sense of indignation from the parent concerned, because if it had been one of my children, I would have thought, well, the police must have good reason to suspect either the individual or the people they were with. And even though I would trust my own child, I would feel that maybe they're getting into some dodgy relationships with others. And I think the reassurance I want to give to constituents is really that this is not widespread, that you have very good reason for asking to search. And if we can give that reassurance, I think that would be accepted by the vast majority of people.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as a parent of two boys now, really young men, I think most parents, if it's explained in relation to offensive weapons, that what you're contributing to is hopefully some fight that will end up with someone having a black eye doesn't escalate into someone being stabbed, because there was that culture previously where, you know, possibly perfectly well behaved young people would take something with them for fear of being attacked by someone else, and then that you can see how that could deteriorate quite quickly in the heat of a moment. And the message is obviously that no party, you know, if none of our young people or none of our communities are equipped with something that can cause ultimately, sadly, fatal harm to another, then we are helping to minimise the risk of something getting completely out of hand. So some of the message that I've given to parents before is that actually this is, you know, searching your child is protecting your child as much as it is everyone else's.
Okay. Any comments on the statistics themselves?
Yeah, Chair, I just wish to highlight a couple of points. Again, we've spoke at great length regarding the stop and search figures, but I hope that members see when we talk about a 19.4% positive searches round about drugs-wise, and whilst the numbers are far smaller for offensive weapons, you'll still see an increase in terms of where we were last year, which I think does go to show that we are targeting the right people in the right place and at the right time, and that is what we'll continue to do. At number 3, and it links in very much with Evelyn's point earlier on round about the health and social care integration, you'll see that our staff are far better now at identifying vulnerable individuals within our community and are actively making sure that they're placing referrals through that can be shared with our partner agencies in an effort to try and address issues within our community at a far earlier stage. So that's a really positive message to see. 13 on the stats, again, really pleasing, and it's certainly one I think the communities always like to see when we start to strip some money and some assets and valuables off those who indulge in criminal behaviour, and again it's a very, very pleasing figure for Midlothian, and that will continue as we move ahead in addressing serious and organised crime. And 14, again, hugely pleasing figure to see the reported thefts by housebreaking significantly down in Midlothian. I gave the caveat the last time, though, that unfortunately I see the flip side in terms of the sheds and the garages, which is a concern to me. But pleasing to note the big reduction in people's dwelling houses being broken into. Lastly, for those who are in colour, they will see that the one that sticks out the page is round about making our roads safer. However, you can look at this in a number of ways. The really pleasing factor for me is the 0 fatalities that we have in Midlothian in comparison to 3 last year. You'll see also in the definition of serious injuries that's quite wide-ranging for somebody who's detained in hospital overnight with concussion and observations. I'm pleased to tell you that the vast majority of the people with serious injuries are towards that lesser scale, as opposed to those who have life-changing injuries. There is no patterns, no identified hotspots, albeit we are looking at one particular stretch within the A702, which has been highlighted to us, and stats would tend to support that as well. So that's actively being looked at the moment by my colleagues in road policing in conjunction with their partners with Bear and Midlothian Council, just to see if there is anything at all that can be done to try and mitigate that in the future. But overall, Chair, it's an extremely positive report in terms of that, and I'm happy to take any questions anybody has for me.
Thank you, Chair. I'm reassured by the reduction in housebreaking. Just as an aside, there's a very thriving Facebook forum for Bonnyrigg residents, about 1,000 people, and there was a couple of incidents about a month ago where I think it might have been reported in the paper. It was somebody who was standing outside the back door undoing the door handle, and word got around, and this happened a couple of times, and everyone in Bonnyrigg seemed to think there was a crime wave going on, but somebody from the community council put a picture of the police report from about 2 years ago, and it was about the same number of incidents. Now, on the positive side, it meant that word got around, people were more alert, they knew what kind of thing they were to look out for. But on the negative side, people got into panic and said, where the hell are our police when all this is going on? I'm just wondering how you react to the growing social media presence and whether you're actually tapping into that for information as well.
Yes, it's a difficult one for us because we try and use it to best effect, but it's getting that balance struck. When if you do have a crime that's been committed, obviously we're appealing to the community to help us, anybody that has information. Facebook and Twitter are fantastic tools for us. You get a message out to a whole heap of people very, very quickly, very, very efficiently, but that needs to be balanced with that perception element, and the fact is the more times you go out and appeal, the more individuals become scared and things off it. So we are acutely aware of that. What we try and do is balance that with, if we do have good detections, to make sure that we put a positive media story out. And I also have to say we've got a really good working relationship with the advertiser, we work very, very closely with them in trying to make sure we get that balance correct, so that people have a proper reflection in terms of, the volume. We're still appealing for them to come forward and help us with crimes that are outstanding, but ensuring that when we do get a positive detection, that we're actually getting that message out to try and take that level of fear down.
I have nothing but praise, and I really think it's wonderful to get all these reports and the results. When you talk about working closely with the advertiser, I see them, he's sitting there in the background. It's a great publication, but we ourselves have a fantastic publication. It's called the Midlothian News, and our website hits are bigger than the circulation of the advertiser. I keep being reminded of that, and it's probably very good to use that as well, because the social media today is so important, and the police really ought to also become very much part of it, whether it is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. You really should be on all of it. And I'm sure you're looking at this very carefully yourself, but I couldn't encourage you more.
Yeah, Councillor De Vink makes a very valid point, and certainly as we move forward with the new community policing model, that will be one of the areas that we are trying to exploit as much as we can, and having links through to all different community councils. We're aware certain community councils have their own Facebook pages, so in trying to get that message out as far and wide as we can to as many followers as we can will be one of the key tasks for our new community policing teams.
Yeah, I mean, just an example, I don't want to bore you, but we had a break-in, they took 3 puppies, and the owner of the puppies put them on Facebook, and it really went viral, and within 6 hours of going onto Facebook, somebody rang her because she had left a reference telephone number and said that's where you could pick them up. And the police did, and we are now going to have, I will be a witness with much pleasure of the person that stole them sometime in April. But, you know, it is unbelievable what the social media can do. And I became a real fan of Facebook, having always been very suspicious of it.
Given the recent publicity that has been going towards restoring drink at football matches, excuse me, a few weeks ago we had the first Celtic Rangers game for 3 years. Was there any significant increase in domestic violence that we know about?
No, not in this area. Yeah, I think that was just at the beginning of February, wasn't it, that we saw that. And I mean, it is an issue that we're constantly monitoring. You know, if it does, and nationally, I think there was a bit of a kind of mixed picture. There was initial reports that there hadn't been a spike in domestic violence, but then quite quickly, I think there were figures emerged or indications certainly that indeed there had been some increase in reports, but not that it's been experienced in Midlothian.
Would Police Scotland support the return of drink at football matches?
No.
Well, I am not 100% sure what the official Police Scotland view will be. I would imagine at the moment there'll be early discussions about what the implications would be. But, I mean, the example that's often given is that rugby fixtures allow alcohol. And we could probably debate all day as to why that might have been deemed appropriate and yet football wasn't. And, you know, we have to look at the history as to how we arrived at where we did or where we have. And the biggest driver has been about the history of violence and disorder that sadly did characterise some of those fixtures, and the reduction and removal of alcohol in the grounds and at the game certainly helped to reduce the levels of disorder and violence associated sadly with those games, but there'll be a whole host of other views and other interested parties, I'm sure, who would seek to say that was then in the 80s, 90s, this is now. Are we confident that behaviour and culture has moved on sufficiently and matured to the point where alcohol could be consumed sensibly and enjoyed as part of a social and sporting event without having the unacceptable violence with it? Sadly, my own personal view is no, it hasn't.
Thank you, Chair. We're probably digressing a wee bit going on to this subject, but as we are there, my feeling is that by banning alcohol in football grounds, we're addressing the symptom rather than the root cause. There are a few reasons why I don't think it would cause the kind of problems that have been talked about. One is I think that contentious matches like Rangers Celtic wouldn't be allowed to have alcohol. Also that alcohol would only be served within an hour or an hour and a half of kick-off or whatever. And I draw a parallel with the laws in Scotland. When I came to Scotland back in the 70s, when pubs closed at 10:30, people were drinking up quickly because they were being thrown out to 10:30. And then when the closing time went to about 11:30, there wasn't the increase in problems that people thought because people were more relaxed over the drinking. And I think the current situation, the people who will cause the trouble are the people who are drinking in the pubs beforehand, and they're probably going to drink up an extra couple of pints before they go to the match, which they might otherwise have drunk at the football ground. So I don't see it as the issue that many people do.
Clearly an issue where there's still to be much debate is perhaps the safest place to put that one just now. Have we any other questions on the performance report we're happy to accept? Thank you. That then takes us to item 9, which is the Quarter 3 performance report from Fire and Rescue.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to show you today is a new performance report that you've had previously. There's been a lot of work to try and provide a single performance report for local senior officers delivering to local authorities across the whole of Scotland. So what I've got for you today is a new style report. What we're asking is, well, the question we will be asking is, do you like it? And I'll take that feedback from you guys and feedback to the LSO, who unfortunately can't be here today. But what I will do is I'll go through the report. If we go to the introduction, it not only gives us information on the quarterly figures, but also gives us information on the year to date. And the data analysts have tried to make it a little bit more visual for people. And I think those of you who have got in colour may appreciate that, but those of you, unfortunately, who are in black and white may not see the benefit of it. So we'll just go from the introduction. The introduction talks about what we're doing as a service, and it outlines the 5 priorities which were outlined in the local fire and rescue plan for Midlothian 2014 to 2017. The next page takes us on to the performance summary. Very pleasing to see that things are going well in Midlothian. The performance summary, you'll see that those of you that have got it, there's green circles there. So if you see a green circle, it means that the 5-year average, the figure is either equal to or been improved upon in the last 5 years. There's only one area, which is road traffic collisions, which Kenny just mentioned. They've actually gone up by up to 9% higher than what they have done over that period, over the last 5 years. So for Midlothian, the performance is good in 5 out of the 6 areas. So it really is a good report. If you go down to the incident overview, year to date we've dealt with 878 incidents in Midlothian, which is a decrease in 61 from the reporting year last year. The next part talks about the local risk management and preparedness, which we do working in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and how we work with partners to mitigate risks. And then we get into the sort of performance part, which are the priorities that are in the local plan. Now I'll take you through it, explaining it first, and then we'll get into the figures. I'll only do this once, and then we'll get into the figures behind it. In each of the priority areas, you have the priority itself, and then you have the results and the reasons and the actions. The graphs below it, you've got a sort of jaggedy line on the sort of top left, and that's your 5-year data for Midlothian, which is split into quarters. And opposite that, you have your year-to-date, your bar chart has your year-to-date incidents. The graph below that actually shows 3 different areas. It shows Midlothian in the blue line, then it shows Scotland in the sort of dotted green line, and then in the red dotted line it shows the East Service Delivery Area of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. And then the graph below that breaks it down into the ward areas. So what you'll see is your year-to-date figures for the ward areas in Midlothian. So that's just to let you know what each of the graphs are. Whether you like them or not, that's up for each individual to determine, but that's what we've been furnished with. For the first priority, which is accidental dwelling fires, in Midlothian during the last quarter, we only responded to 12 accidental dwelling fires, which is a reduction in 4 incidents from the same quarter last year. The long-term trend shows us slightly below that of the Scottish and East Delivery Area trends. So from that, we're reducing the amount of accidental dwelling fires and we're actually below the Scottish average and the East Service Delivery Area average as well, which is very positive. It's also, in the reasons, it's pleasing to see that it's the lowest figure we've ever had in the last 5 years. And out of the 12 accidental dwelling fires, the majority of them happened in single occupancy households again, which I mention every single time, and we're still working on dealing with vulnerable people, particularly in single occupancy households. and the majority of them were caused by either cooking or smoking. And some of them will have alcohol. Alcohol will be involved in some of them as well. And that is a trend across the whole of Scotland. Cooking, smoking, particularly where alcohol has been involved. What are we doing about it? As you see below, during the reporting period, we've visited 231 homes to carry out home fire safety visits in Midlothian. We've fitted 114 smoke detectors, and out of these houses, 84 of them were classed as high-risk houses for the Fire and Rescue Service statistics. So by getting the information from the local authority on our single occupancy households, we're able to target these areas and actually fit smoke detectors on higher risk properties. And the long-term aim is that we'll continue to reduce the amount of accidental dwelling fires. If we go on to the next one, which is fire casualties, you'll see in this last period, unfortunately we had one reported fire fatality in that last period, which was Nivendow Caravan Park. The details of which I can't share yet because it's obviously still under investigation. I've not even seen the fire investigation report. The process for fire fatality case studies is it goes through the process, then up to the Procurator Fiscal, and there's sometimes a little bit lag time after that before the Fiscal releases it, where we can then have a full case study on to learn, so that all partners can learn on what actually happened at that particular instance. So we're in that process at the moment. And we also had three other casualties from fire in this period. Historically in Midlothian, we have had low numbers of casualties from fires, and the presence of smoke detectors in all of these fires, apart from the fire fatality, allowed us to get people out of the properties quickly, which again, as I say every time, if people get out of fires quickly, there's less rehabilitation needed, less need for them to go to hospital, etc. Therefore, it's a win-win for everyone, getting them out quickly and getting them back in quickly, because the quicker we get them out and there's less fire damage, we can get them back into their homes very quickly as well. The next one's deliberate fires. During the period, we had 66 deliberate fires, which was an increase from 17 in the same period last year. 90% of these fires were what we would class as deliberate secondary fires, and 60% of these fires actually happened in bins, refuse, etc. So that is our biggest target. It happens continually where youths, I would suggest, are setting fire to bins. Now, that could be bins next to commercial premises, it could be park bins, but 60% of our deliberate fires are set in refuse bins, which obviously has an impact for the local authority because we need to replace these bins. So we'll continue to work to raise awareness at key times and raise awareness through schools about deliberate fire setting. It's obviously got an antisocial behaviour angle to it as well, which causes problems for all partners. The reduction of special services, we only attended 14 road traffic collisions, and out of these, 17 people were rescued. Obviously that's not all of the road traffic collisions in Midlothian because it's only the ones we were called to. The next area, which isn't one of our main priorities in the performance plan, in the local plan, but as an area that I've put in because it is on the increase. We attended 40 casualties from non-fire emergencies in Midlothian in the last period. That's an increase in 17 casualties when compared to the last period. Now, what we're starting to do is, about 3 years ago, we started carrying defibrillators on frontline fire engines. And the way they were brought in, they were only supposed to be used on fire service staff. That's when they were brought in initially. Obviously, that's sort of grown a wee bit arms and legs since then, and what we're now finding is that through one of the later reports that we attached as appendix, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of the Fire Service has suggested that we should be looking at not just going as co-responders, but going as first responders. And in the Midlothian area, we've set up we've done a lot of work to work with bariatric persons, etc. And in the Midlothian area, we're actually now being turned out as first responders to go and deal with heart attack victims. So this number has increased, and I think this number is going to steadily increase as more partners realise that, or certainly the ambulance service realise that we will attend to people who are suffering from heart attacks to give them, well, quick treatment, hopefully. Then that number is going to steadily increase. So it's a point of just to raise awareness to the group that that this will continue to go up. Whether or not that will be a negative, I think it's actually quite a positive indicator, because the quicker you can get to someone who's suffering a heart attack with a defibrillator, then the better chance I've got of surviving that. And the last one is unwanted fire alarm signals. We attended 100 that last reporting period, which is an increase of 13 from 8 to 7 the year before. Again, it has steadily increased over the whole of Scotland, and we continue to give our stage 1 letters. There's no properties or premises in Midlothian had a second stage letter yet, but there are a couple of premises that are on the cusp of getting a second stage letter. And again, a second stage letter means that we could go in and withdraw our services, but the likelihood is we won't. We'll go in and help them with some fire safety solutions to reduce their equipment failures that they're having. And that's that report. The next part, if there's no questions, or are there any questions on that?
Yeah, well, that concerned me a wee bit there when you said you would withdraw fire services to people who have got a second stage. Or was that you wouldn't attend if an alarm came through?
Well, that's where there's been lots of discussion. I think they've done that down in London Fire Brigade, and what they've done is they've basically withdrawn services and started trying to charge people. So whenever something like that happens in another service, you start looking at saying, right, why are we going to every single equipment failure? I mean, there's thousands of these daily over Scotland, and it was the same in London. So London have come a bit unstuck because they've decided to start charging people or not attending, and it's caused problems because some people are starting to challenge, saying, where in the Act does it say you can charge us for attending what we think is a fire? So they're in problem, and the policy actually says that we could go to that position. We could go to that position eventually, where we say if this premises that they're not pulling their socks up, then we would consider, or not us, but the Deputy Chief Officer would consider withdrawing our services. We don't think it'll ever get there. It is in the policy. We don't think we'll ever get there because we think the majority of premises actually they've got problems and they want a wee bit of assistance and they want us to identify how best they can fix it. We're not in that position in this area in the slightest. The majority of places that we've had contact, in fact, we've sent lots of first stage letters and the owners are actually contacting us, asking us for a wee bit of advice. So we're going out attending places saying, well, you may want to move that from there to there, or change that from that to this, and just put other processes in place. And that seems to be working well in this area.
I think that's the key point, isn't it? That to get to even the stage of getting a second stage letter takes a fair number of repeat calls, from my understanding. So it's not simply a case that you've had 2 repeat calls and you're getting even the letters. It's where you're getting to the stage of a continual repeat of a false alarm. And no, I could see where if somebody wasn't willing to listen to anything at all, or to try and take any action to stop it happening, being a false alarm, I could see how that would be very frustrating for the Fire and Rescue Service. I wanted to pick up, Dean, on the home safety visits. Clearly we've had a huge increase in the number that you've been undertaking. I was wondering how that compared across the board with other parts of Scotland.
We are, in this area, there's been a few things happen recently. The Assistant Chief Officer in charge of prevention and protection has been looking at home safety visits across Scotland and sort of partnership working across Scotland, and how we are. If you look at the fire safety and the prevention and protection activities, the next paper that I've got, if you look at the home fire safety visits, you'll see that the blue line underneath is the points target for Scotland, and the red line above is where we are in Midlothian. We're well above what our target should be. We're performing very well as far as the whole of Scotland's concerned. We've got a lot of good got a lot of good partnership working, and we're getting the opportunity to get this single occupancy households. We're starting to target more high risk households. Therefore, this is a points-based system, but you'll see we're well above. There's a lot of areas in Scotland that aren't quite meeting this target, and we're well above the target. So we're sitting very well placed across Scotland. Midlothian are in a really good position as far as that's concerned.
Particularly when looking at vulnerable people or the high risks, I mean, am I right in saying that there's a follow-up process after they've had the initial visit?
Yes, not just the initial visit. If we went into somewhere and we thought the person was potentially a vulnerable person, we would then complete our documentation and send it round the partners, and that would then start hitting social work. Police would get to know about it. What we do on that, and it comes from both ways. If it comes to us that a person may be vulnerable, or we see a vulnerable person, we go into this referral process, this referral case study, and what we're seeing for Midlothian area, when this same Assistant Chief Officer done his trawled through his stats, it was showing that in Midlothian we were sitting at, for every single referral that we had done to partners and they had done to us, we were sitting at 100% complete, that the processes were completely finished and the outcomes that the people had been dealt with, had been through all the processes, all the partners had been involved, and we were 100% complete in comparison to some other areas in Scotland. Was fantastic. So the partnership approach is working very, very well in this area, and I think we can be satisfied that all partners are pulling together, and I think a lot of it's to do with we all know each other, and the people do work together on a daily basis. So we're starting to form very strong bonds and good partnership arrangements, so that when we put something into social work, they deal with it fairly quickly, and vice versa. They send something out to us. I was in the office the other day, and social work were on the phone to the community firefighter about 2 vulnerable people, and he went out to do enhanced fire safety visits with them that very day. So it's very, very quick. The process is very slick, so you can be rest assured that everybody's working well on that front.
It's particularly encouraging to hear, because certainly we know the benefits of the partnership working, and see that when you get the evidence like that, it certainly shows that it's working. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, Midlothian's growing in terms of house buildings, loads and loads of new houses, particularly in my area. I'm just wondering what work you do with the house builders, designers, to make sure that the new generation of houses in Midlothian are safer from the point of view of fire risk, and also the implementation of smoke detectors, perhaps, when the house is built, rather than getting the household or the house buyer to install them.
Yes, there is a lot of work goes on with that. Every single building application, be it for 200 houses or 1 house, comes through our fire safety enforcement officers. So what they'll do is it comes through planning to building control, and then building control send it on to us, and we put the fire regulation side to it. Although all of the architects know the majority of the fire regulations, different local authority areas have different slants on what they want to do with things. Because it's a guidance document, not all local authority areas do exactly the same thing. But what they all do is all insist that smoke detectors are fitted in every single new property that we have. Even so much so, we work to look at the fire safety aspect of things like solar panels, etc. So not only do they look at the smoke detectors, they look at the layout of the houses and look at the other things that are added on, like your solar panels, to look at the fire safety, because when they were first brought in, they weren't wholly safe. Well, they were safe, but if there was a fire in them, the electrical supply couldn't be shut off. It held a sort of charge, which was a risk to firefighter safety as well, and that's all been worked on. So that is that your fire service and your building control departments work on that on a daily basis, and that's for 200 and 300 houses, or even just one house, or even extensions to houses. So that's constant.
Could I just emphasize, a friend of mine built a house near Calfrey Mill, and it was far away from any water supply, and he had to put in a 50,000 litre tank so that he, if there was a fire, there was ample water to douse it. Quite impressed by that.
Have we any other questions or comments to the performance report? Happy to note. Thank you. It takes us then to item 10, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service future projects.
Yes, thank you. All the local senior officers in Scotland have been asked to go to their scrutiny committees and just give a wee sort of insight into what is actually happening or has been happening in Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service the last 2 years, and what will be happening in the next few years. So basically, the background obviously is that we were 8 legacy services, and we're, like the police, we're squeezing 8 into one, and that brings its challenges. That brings its challenges for everybody concerned. Just to let you know that the senior management restructure, obviously, as a way of saving money, rather than have 8 chief fire officers in Scotland and 8 deputy chiefs in Scotland, we now have 1 chief fire officer and 1 deputy chief. But the senior management structure, when they put it together, they had 1 chief, 1 deputy and 3 assistant chief officers. They've now looked at that, and they've introduced a new role called the deputy assistant chief officer. Now, there's been a new Deputy Assistant Chief Officer assigned to the East Hub, which is our area, and that gentleman is John Miller, so I'm sure that he will be coming around to meet you in due course. He's obviously got all the local authorities to get around. He's just been newly appointed, and I don't know if you've had any communications about that yet. You have, yeah. So a new role's been created to assist with the sort of senior manager's sort of workload. What's been happening over the past wee while, and it's just been agreed at the Fire Board, is they had a special appliance and equipment review looking at, basically trying to give equity of resources right across Scotland. You would imagine 8 different services all having their own types of equipment, their own types of urban search and rescue, water response, chemical or hazardous material responses. What they've done is they've looked at the pool across Scotland, looked at where the biggest risks are, and then they've started to look at where they're going to start putting all these specialist resources, so that wherever you live in Scotland, you've got equal distribution of services. So your call-out times for something like an urban search and rescue team should be pretty similar across Scotland. Obviously, Scotland's got 2 what we call key sites, Edinburgh and Glasgow, so that they're based around these areas. But there's other satellite sites being put out, so that further up north they've got equality of service as well at the same time. There are no real implications for Midlothian. Midlothian, we've got the 2 stations. We've got Dalkeith, which is a full-time fire station, and Pennycook, which is a part-time fire station. Dalkeith they're trained up to urban search and rescue level, so they form part of the response that would go with New Craig Hall Fire Station, with all your urban search and rescue kits. Should you get a bomb, should you get lot of damage to a building. Anywhere where you would need heavy equipment to stabilise a building, like the one they had, the explosion they had in Glasgow, sort of thing. So Dalkeith are going to remain that resource to go along with New Craig Hall. They train together with New Craig Hall, and they do a lot of work on that. But so there's the specialist appliance review has no implications for Midlothian at this moment in time. The emergency fire recovery review, what they're basically looking at is they're looking at the position of fire stations across Scotland. As you would imagine, with the 8 different services, there's 2 or 3 places in Scotland where you had different fire services with fire stations 2 or 3 miles apart. Now, that's obviously not the best use of resources at all. So what they're looking at is they're looking at where these locations are, and they will be looking potentially to close some stations. That'll be going to the fire board. There are no implications in Midlothian in the slightest. It tends only to be these areas where you had these stations that are 2 or 3 miles apart. That's all the implications for the area. I mentioned about the emergency medical response of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. The Majesty's Inspector said that we should be looking to branch out and do more of this. Now, that's obviously at a strategic leadership level. That's in negotiations with the Health Service and the Scottish Ambulance Service, quite to what role the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are going to play in the area. But I do think it will. We have in Midlothian been turning out to help a lot of patients who have fallen, elderly patients who have fallen, help them back into their beds, bariatric patients who have fallen and got stuck, to help the ambulance service manoeuvre these people, and also going as first responders to heart attacks. And I think that's only going to increase. And at a strategic level, they're looking at how to formulate that properly. Obviously, they've got the unions and everything they've got to be involved with, and they've got to get agreement. We're doing it in Midlothian at the moment. There's some local authority areas across Scotland who aren't even at that stage yet, but we have been doing it simply because we've got the defibrillators on appliances. So we think, rather than just have them sitting in the station, let's get out there and get on with it. There's a retained duty system project. There is a retained part-time station called up in Pennycook, and the retained duty system is a project which will be going on for the next few years. There are a lot of retained in Scotland. There's a lot of retained fire stations, and we're looking at ways. Obviously, there's been pressure on staffing retained stations over the last 3 or 4 years, because a lot of people don't work as locally as they used to do. So we're having real pressures there as well. So there's a national review going on, but it's going to probably take 2 or 3 years to complete. And lastly, just to say that everything will be consulted on. Some of the national things will be consulted on nationally, and some of the more local. If there was anything to happen in Midlothian, you can guarantee there'd be consultation, negotiation locally on that as well. Thank you very much.
I think certainly it's encouraging that through the reviews that are already happening, that there are no implications for Midlothian. I think we've just heard the benefit we have of the partnership working in the current arrangements we have. So I think to continue to maintain that and to have the services available as they currently are, certainly for the time being, is very, very useful for us. Do colleagues have any questions or comments? Happy to note the future of the fire service in Midlothian. Thank you. Takes us then to item 11, which is the Strategic Assessment 2015-16 timetable.
Thanks. This report just basically sets out our proposals for the strategic assessment for the next couple of years. The strategic assessment at the moment is produced annually. It's a key document for the Community Safety Partnership. What the partnership does is partners work together using data from the previous year to set forward-looking projections for future years. At present, that's done on an annual basis, looking 1 year ahead. What this report suggests is that we change that, and we start initially looking 2 years ahead, which would take us to the end of the life of the current community safety strategy, so to 2018. The reasoning behind that is that it's a massive piece of work to create a strategic assessment from scratch each year. So this is to save partner time. What we would propose is we'd write the 2-year strategic and then we'll review it annually. So we'll obviously review it in a year's time, and if it needs a rewrite at that point, we'll do that if that's needed. But if it doesn't, we'll just tweak it as required to save partner time. So really what I'm asking here is that partners note the timetable that's attached as the appendix, agree that proposed change to the timing of the assessment, and just note that once we've finalised the strategic assessment, we'll present it to the board for approval. In previous years, we have had to approve it via email, so I have put a timetable in there which does accommodate it coming up to the board, but should the community planning timetable mean that we have to do it slightly differently, it may be that we have to do it by email. So that's just the main points from the report.
I think it's a very engaging process, and one that makes sure that we're always looking in the right direction. I'm happy to move that we accept. Any questions, comments? Thank you. Takes us then to item 12, which is the 2015-16 Community Safety Strategy, Antisocial Behaviour Strategy and Partnership Agreement.
Okay, so this report presents these 3 updated documents. At the previous meeting, I presented the updated Community Safety Partnership priorities for the next year. One thing I would like to note is that from that report, on the cover section, I was actually missing one of the priorities, which is road safety, which is obviously a major priority for the partnership, not something we've dropped at all. It was just omitted from the front of the report, and you'll see in the minute of the last meeting that it wasn't included in the list. Just to clarify, that is still in the strategy, and that's been corrected now within these documents. So what we've got here is an updated community safety strategy that includes all of the priorities. It has been reformatted slightly to make it a more user-friendly document. So what we've done is we've extracted the detailed action plan and put that separately, and then we've just included a summary of the action and PIs within the document. The detailed action plan, partners have all worked hard on that, coming together to develop targets which are based on sound kind of trend information and baseline. Behind that, we've got another even more detailed document which has a definition of every PI behind it, just to make sure that everybody really can measure what they've said they're going to put in the plan. So we've done a lot of work on that. And finally, we've got the partnership agreement, which again has been updated. And what we've done here is we've just made sure that that reflects all of the partner roles, and that the 3 documents don't duplicate each other. So there was previously a lot of information about the roles of the partners within the antisocial behaviour and community safety strategies, but we've taken that out because that's in the partnership agreement. So we've cut them down and reduced the duplication. So really here, main points are that we've updated these strategies, and I would ask the board to please agree the community safety strategy, the action plan, the antisocial behaviour strategy and the updated partnership agreement.
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I think it's certainly encouraging when you see it all pulled together like this, and certainly when you start looking through the community safety strategy, the sheer range that this board covers. It's not simply a matter of it being about one issue or another. It's a huge range delivering community safety priorities across Midlothian, which again I know it's an ongoing frustration of colleagues, but that there are still 2 vacancies of elected members on this board, and when you hear the discussions that we're having this morning, the discussions we had on the new psychoactive substances at the last meeting, the level of detail that we're able to get into at this board meeting and to take forward, and we see the changes coming through in the police structures as a result of these discussions, and the interaction we're able to have, it continues to be a huge frustration that we do have those 2 vacancies left, that there are clearly very useful viewpoints that can be taken and shared, and we don't necessarily always have to agree, but the fact that they're not here to be aired is very, very disappointing. I would hope that, given the production of the strategies here, perhaps members who are not participating yet in this board can look at the detail that's included in here and see the sheer range that we do cover, and perhaps give some consideration to participation going forward, especially as we look to develop and continue to expand the remit of safer communities. Ian?
Thank you. I'd just like to touch on that issue of our missing representatives here. Can I ask if the organisations that are present here today meet up with representatives of the opposition groups separately, so that there is a level of scrutiny which is clearly lacking?
Yeah, I can confirm I have met the opposition in a separate meeting.
Chairman.
Can I just suggest, Convener, sorry, that that's probably a waste of public money with these people refusing to take their places up here, and then the police and the fire brigade have then got to go and repeat this all over again when they could be sitting here. I think that should be recorded and show our disapproval of the members of the opposition for refusing to take their places up in this board and wasting public money.
Chairman, I think we should be much stronger than that. It is an outrage that the opposition is simply unwilling to join us. And we really ought to, probably the best thing is to report them to the Standards Commission, because in the end of the day, it is a matter of standards that really should be held up. And I find it very depressing that police time is wasted, fire brigade time is wasted. It is utterly abominable.
I would say, though, while disappointing, I wouldn't suggest it's any breach of the Code of Conduct. It's a committee appointment, and we can't force anyone to participate in any committees. What we can do is express disappointment at the lack of participation, because I think we saw from the Council last week, when we had the motion on new psychoactive substances, there was a degree of conversation there, and it was a very useful debate. I just felt and continue to feel that this forum is where we can have far greater information and that higher level of discussion and lengthier debate on important issues. We've talked about stop and search today, we've talked about new psychoactive substances before. The next meeting there will be other issues where we're talking. This is really a forum where we can have that further, more detailed level of debate about these issues, and then reports can go to Council to take on the ins and outs of it. You know, it's certainly not a breach of the Code of Conduct.
But wasting police time, well, you laugh at it, but that is effectively what it does. It's outrageous that they all have to repeat it. They put in an enormous amount of time and effort, and then they have to do it all over again. It's just outrageous.
I would tend to agree. Comments, questions on the strategies before us? I think the timetable, the agreements here are absolutely brilliant. I think there's a huge amount of work being done in the removal of duplication. It certainly is something that's very welcome. It makes it far easier to read and understand the direction of travel. Do colleagues have any other questions or comments on the report? Are we happy to agree? That then takes us to item 13, which is the Community Safety Partnership Communication and Engagement Plan.
Okay, so what this report does is basically it sets out the partnership's communication and engagement activity, providing a summary of what we've done in the previous year and what we've got planned for next year. In terms of our key aim as a partnership, that Midlothian is a safe place to live, work and visit, a key element of that is how safe people feel within Midlothian. Not only how safe they feel, but also that they're equipped with the knowledge to be able to keep themselves safe. So that's what this plan is all about. So this is driven forward by the delivery group. Partners around the table at the delivery group all contribute to this. It's every meeting we discuss it. Partners all contribute, come up with ideas of what can go on the plan, and then you'll see in the appendix the range of partners that are involved in attending all of the events. A lot of these events are kind of low cost in terms of resources. It's just staff time that goes into them and kind of leaflets and advice that we hand out. What we're finding is that at these individual events, you know, we're managing to speak to some events, kind of up to 100 people we can speak to about community safety issues, so they're highly valuable events. Also on here, we've got a summary of some of the kind of media and press activity and social media activity that we've undertaken. So, for example, activity on Facebook and Twitter, that's working in partnership. We've obviously discussed that through the delivery group. We've kind of do that as part of all of our campaigns. So really, the reason I've brought this to the board is just to make everyone aware of all the positive work that we're doing, and also to present the proposed plan for next year. And it's just a case of if there's anything that partners can contribute to that at all, please let us know. It's really for noting and approval.
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the engagement that we do undertake certainly reaps benefits. One example was the +1 mentoring. After we had a presentation that was the last board meeting from +1, there was an article produced and put out, and I think at the time there were 9 mentors in place, and following the article that was produced, a further 10 actually came forward. So it's a huge benefit, and it shows that really actually the engagement that we're undertaking to put out the messages and encouraging participation in community safety certainly pay benefits. So we'll look forward to a highly active engagement over the coming year. Happy to accept the report. Thank you. Which then takes us to item 14, a report on the workshop from the 2nd of February.
Yeah, this report is really it's a report for noting. This provides a summary of the discussion that happened at the workshop on the 2nd of February. It was a really positive event. We had 27 attendees, presentations from the police service, and we also had Margaret from Criminal Justice giving a presentation. The workshop covered Midlothian policing, what's happened since Police Scotland came in, and proposals around the new model. And then we moved on to look at the community justice national proposals, how that's going to impact on Midlothian, and the establishment of a reducing reoffending partnership. So the 2 key things that came out of it were obviously the new policing model, which we've already covered, and also the proposal to develop the reducing reoffending partnership. And it did seem from the workshop that there was a strong lean towards that being incorporated into the community safety partnership. So what the next steps will be that we'll go away and do some detailed work to develop a proposed model on that, and I would hope to come to the next meeting with a more detailed proposal.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I attended the workshop, and it was very useful. I found having the group sessions worked really, really well. Again, going back to a previous point you mentioned, Chair, I didn't notice any members of the opposition group there again. Can I ask, did you engage with them in any other forum to take their views on what's happening?
I haven't specifically engaged with them about any of this apart from the workshop, but I did make numerous effort to invite them to the workshop. They were sent all the papers, so that was my effort to engage with them. I didn't duplicate on that.
Yeah, could I really share Councillor Baxter's view? It was an outstanding occasion. I learned a great deal when I was there, and I think we should have more of those workshops because it really is very educational, very constructive, and I hope that some of the thoughts that we as elected representatives gave also found favour and could be used in the way forward.
Certainly, from my point of view, it was a very useful workshop. I don't know, I mean, the police, was the feedback on the proposed structures useful off the back of the workshop?
Yes, it certainly was, Chair. And as I say, in taking up Councillor DeVink's point, in terms of a future workshop, I think it would be worthwhile when we talk about a review in 6 months' time. It's probably to factor something in about September, October time to actually allow that 6 months review on the same type of basis and take further feedback at that point.
I was just going to say community justice.
I just wanted to support the proposal in the paper and to offer Rosie and colleagues whatever help that I can personally provide to develop the proposal and the arrangements before the next meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly very welcome. I think there was certainly my feeling was a sort of very much a shared idea of community justice forming in this format. So look forward to seeing proposals around how that structure could work, because recognise it will mean changes to the structure of this board, and perhaps, you never know, perhaps that change might be an opportunity to yet again reach out a hand to welcome other members to participate, but we can always hope. We're happy to agree the report. With that, can I thank members for their attendance?